This is the WRDN Morning Farm Report. I'm Brian Winnikins, and joining us this morning is 29th Assemblyman Clint Moses, and we're going to talk about some recent food labeling bills that was passed through the Assembly Agriculture Committee. Thank you to our newsmaker sponsors, including Wisconsin Farmers Union, A&J Agronomy, Synergy Co-op, Osseo Plastics, Cannabis Silo, the Animal Wellness Center of Buffalo Valley, and Compeer Financial. Representative Moses, thanks for joining us today. Well, the Assembly Agriculture Committee, which you're a part of, recently passed a pair of bills regarding food labeling. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, these are really great bills. They're pretty common sense bills. And for once, it's something that really shouldn't be very partisan out there. I mean, it's a good bill for the farmers of Wisconsin. It's a good bill for the consumers of Wisconsin. The first one involves dairy products. And the second one, which is my bill, involves meat. So meat labeling, making sure that what it says it is on the package is actually what you're getting.
And this has been something that has really kind of developed over the last few years. We'll start with the dairy version. FDA has rules on labeling of dairy products, which for some reason they just don't enforce. So it's kind of like Wisconsin and other states now are having to kind of step up here to pass their own bill on labeling milk does not come from a plant, it comes from a mammal. And that's really what it boils down to.
Yeah, and that's right. I mean, there's not a lot of legislation across the country on this type of stuff, especially when it comes to the dairy. But what better state to lead the way on the dairy than Wisconsin as far as being the dairy state and making sure that we are protecting the products out there and the consumers, once again, know what they're getting. I know it's kind of a downside for those that maybe drink almond milk. The alternative is, I guess, we're going to have to start calling it nut juice, but it's kind of a little different, but at least it's truth in labeling. And yeah, you're right. At the federal level, they have not done a lot to regulate, but they have, but they just don't enforce it. One of the things that changed on this bill very early on is some of the penalties involved actually incarceration and imprisonment. And we're not here to lock up the grocery store owners or the people that are selling these products. So the penalties are really monetary. So it's pretty reasonable. I think very, very common sense.
Now, is it monetary toward the grocery store or to the company?
To the labeler, the company that's providing the product. Good question.
Now, is there a concern about the interstate commerce clause? I mean, how can Wisconsin tell, even though California seems to want to think they can do it to everybody else, but how can a Wisconsin law tell a California company, no, you can't call it almond milk?
Yeah, and that's one of the big issues out there is how we're going to enforce that. That's something that's going to be done within the state, whether or not we're going to allow those products to hit our shelves or not. You know, of course, this has a little ways to go yet because it's got to get through the Senate and it's got to get past the governor's desk as well. But I'm pretty confident that, you know, this one's going to go through, or actually both of them should go through. Both of these bills had been introduced before. They kind of stalled out because of the pandemic last year, I should say. They received pretty much unanimous support across the assembly last time they came through.
Talking with the 29th Assemblyman Clint Moses this morning about a couple of food labeling bills that have passed the Assembly Agriculture Committee. Let's talk about the bill that you introduced on the meat labeling. Again, this is really geared toward the Impossible Burgers or this plant-based meat or quote unquote meat, but it's really just plants. It's not meat.
Yeah, and this one's near and dear to me. I grew up on a dairy farm, but of course we raised beef as well. If you're in dairy farming, you're also typically in beef farming or meat farming in some standpoint as well. I currently have a small beef cattle operation north of Menominee, and also we raise sheep as well. So it's near and dear to me. You know, this is why we have legislation. This is why I'm down here in Madison, because things evolve, things change. Who would have ever thought, you know, maybe even 10, 20 years ago that we'd be looking at raising cultured meat in a petri dish. So that is exactly what this bill is designed to protect, is some of this new technology that's out there with the cultured meat and different byproducts that are out there, making sure that meat, when it's labeled meat, actually comes from the flesh of an animal.
Is that a concern? I mean, there's even eggs now that are really not really eggs. And is it some of these regulations just because that they can't keep up with the changes in technology?
Yeah, and that's a lot of it. We have to be adaptive. You know, part of my job is going out and listening to what farmers, what my constituents are talking about, what their concerns are, and adapting, writing bills that are going to solve problems. One of my favorite parts of being down here, and many of you may know I'm pretty new down here. I've been in the private business sector doing a little farming. I also own a business in Menominee as well. But for me, this legislation is very, very new. I love the fact that people can come to me with problems and I can actually propose bills that might solve problems and solutions to those issues that they have. So yeah, we're just adapting to technology with these bills.
So they did pass the Assembly Ag Committee. So when do you foresee both of these bills being going before the full Assembly and then on to the Senate?
Well, I was optimistic they were going to get to the floor in our April session here coming up next week. That does not look like it's going to happen. I'll know more about that on Friday when we have the official calendar come out for what actually gets to the floor for voting. If it does not make the April calendar, it's going to be on May's. Our goal is really to have this rolled out, both of them, the meat and the dairy one, but especially the dairy one. It'd be really nice for June Dairy Month to be able to kind of celebrate with the farmers and the dairy community. So I think if it doesn't make it in April, we're going to see it in May for sure.
Are you hopeful that by passing these, and I know other states have done some similar things, but if enough states do this, that's kind of going to be able to help with that Commerce Clause issue?
I do. And I know I didn't address that question completely before when you asked it, but that's really what it is. It's kind of a game of momentum where, we got to lead the way on this, especially with the dairy. We should be the leaders on this. I do think a lot of other states are going to follow. There's a lot of states that have legislation on starting, I should say, in the drafting phase, not on the books, but what we call jacketed. So at least the rough drafts. I think a lot of them were honestly waiting, especially once again with that dairy bill, to wait and see what Wisconsin did. I think by us passing this, that's going to be the first step in the right direction. I think a lot of, especially in the Midwest, a lot of states are going to follow.
29th Assemblyman Clint Moses is talking about some of the bills on food labeling that has just recently passed the Assembly Agriculture Committee. You're listening to the WRDN Morning Farm Report.